how's your for book of business then?
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello to everyone entering the chat, the webinar. Thank you for being here. I think that sound might be just an acknowledgement that the Zoom session is being recorded.
Tanya, shall we give folks one more minute and start at 33 after?
Sure.
Sure.
The people trickling in, so it's good timing. Thinking that alarm is letting us know all the participants that are joining. We have 37 folks on the call, which is wonderful. We love to see full participation. It is part of this initiative in this program since we are the sessions are structured in a way that they build off of each other. So thank you for making the effort to be here on this virtual session this morning. So we can get started if that's okay with you. People are trickling in, but we're going to start very light with introductions and some kind of overview. So
Great. Thanks, Tanya. And we've got a little echo going on, so I'll ask you to mute yourself when you're not speaking. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm Molly Quinlan Hayes, joined by my co-faculty, Tom Claerson. So echoing Tanya's welcome, and so good to have you all here today. I know we met many of you when we were there at in your lovely community a few weeks ago, but again, I'm Executive Director of NCAPER, the National Coalition for Arts Preparedness and Emergency Response. And I'll ask my colleague Tom to introduce himself.
Sure. Tom Clareson, and I am the project director for the Bay Area Arts Readiness Network and senior consultant for digital and preservation services at Lyrasis, which is a library, archives, museum network.
Thank you. And we're really pleased to be working with our implementation partners in this project, the 18th Street Arts Center. And I know Jen Williamson is on the Zoom today, along with our host venues, Theater West, and we'll be coming back to the Skylight Theater on June 25th. This is just a reminder, if you were at our live workshop at Theater West, some of this will be familiar to you, but we just wanted to make sure everyone is starting with the same basis of information. A reminder that the program components include grants, which are being managed by 18th Street, 3 workshops, this being the second. Office hours, we held one last week, and we will have 2 more hour-long drop-in consulting sessions. The development of readiness plans, and we'll talk about the schedule of developing and submitting those before we wrap up today. But really, it's hopefully this is just the beginning of the process of developing a cohort and a network. In the years that Tom and I have been working in this space, it's become clear to us that as much planning and readiness and preparedness as you have in your pocket, it is really the network, the connections, the friends from before that are going to be helpful to you if a crisis occurs. So I know Tanya will be speaking more about that, but we hope that this is the start of that connection. And also just a reminder, we are recording this session today for anyone who cannot be here. We also have all of the program materials on this private webpage that is part of NCAPER. It is ncaper.org/ARERPP. And it includes, and we will continue to update this, but slide decks and recordings of the events. We have some sample emergency plans to kind of kickstart your thinking, handouts from the first workshop, as well as resources that were suggested. And again, we will continue to add to this page. If there's anything that you are looking for and you cannot find, please feel free to drop me an email and we will make sure that we get resources added. I'm going to now turn it over to Tanya to do some group introductions.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to see everyone. I'm grateful for your presence. I'm seeing that there's 47 folks on the call, which is wonderful to see. We heard loud and clear, and this was also one of our objectives when we developed the initiative, is to develop, community and a sense of community, a cohort of groups and comrades, peers that are going through this experience together. And we wanted to set a little bit of time in the best way that we could with today's virtual format to use the chat function and drop in some information by your name, your role, your organization, if you're working in an organization, and something that you're obsessed with right now. And I'll just be kind of sharing out, and we can get to know a little bit of the group if you're comfortable kind of sharing and participating in that way. I also wanted to mention really fast about the camera being on. As this is being recorded, feel free, if you're, at any point you need to walk away, you can take a moment to take a pause or be off camera as, off and on as you're comfortable with throughout the morning. So thank you, Molly. We know Molly. Malati, am I pronouncing your name right? Hi, Malati. Thank you for being here. What's the link again? Okay, so a few of us, Jan from 18th Street and Tom and myself, will be kind of looking at the chat and kind of answering some questions and getting to share out what we hear or answer any questions that might come up. Hi, Malati. Sorry, I wanted to make sure I was pronouncing your name correctly. And you're eager to start working on the plan. Awesome, you're in the right place. Hi, Barry. And some of you all might know each other. That was kind of my sense from the first workshop. In some cases, it was nice to see connections from a few of you that hadn't seen each other in a long time or were pleasantly surprised to know that you were also part of this initiative. So that was really cool. We're hoping that, at the end of this experience, that you're able to forge some stronger relationships, professional or personal relationships with your colleagues here that are participating in the ARERPP. Hi, Aaron Stone, Executive Director from 1111 in the House that does a lot of awesome work in all parts of the city. Hi, Lynn. Nobody wants to share what they're obsessed about. Hi, Amy Roy. Okay. Obsessed with the color lime green, hence the emojis, apple and green. Cool. Hi, Karina. Hi, Victoria. She's also with the Department of Cultural Affairs. Marta, who is, sorry, these are going in pretty quickly. These are all really great. Let me go back to Marta. Italian and based in Los Angeles. Wonderful. We're glad you're here, Marta. Hi, Ellie. Your film adapted from her play is God Is. Hi, Ellie. Okay, got to check that out, Ellie. The chat, I think, Molly, correct me if I'm wrong, might be transcribed, so we might have some of this that we can share. There was also a survey or email that Jan might have sent out a few weeks ago related to a phone tree. That'll have all of your contact information. If you haven't opted in, please reach out to Jan about that so we can include you and share that as a tool for you all, so you guys can have each other's contact information and kind of use that as an extension of these series. Hi there. Hi, Sarah. Singer, songwriter. Oh, okay, no worries. So we hope you feel better. Thank you for being present. And I know being on screen for a few hours might be a lot, but again, if you need to take a pause, just like if you're in person, and we can step away, come back. It is going to be recorded on camera, off camera. We're trying to maximize this time to learn a little bit more about preparedness and some of the things that we might need in order to start really crafting that plan. Boysenberries right now, awesome. Hi, Stina. I know it's kind of arbitrary, but I think it's just interesting when you might anecdotally kind of remember, someone by boysenberries or the color lime green. So, thank you for being here. Marcian, you were our first person on the call in your Silver Lake. Okay. You're organizing. Cool.
This is great.
My current obsession right now is birds. I'm in my Señora phase right now, and I'm really enjoying bird watching and learning more about birds. And I just ordered a hummingbird feeder. So that's my current obsession. So FYI. Hi, Casey. Thank you for sharing your pronouns. Appreciate that. We have Natalie, who's in the room. She's an independent immersive theater creator, singer, and actor, currently obsessed with nighttime stargazing right now. It's beautiful. On a clear night, I'd love to do that too. It's kind of hard where I live. Venn diagrams united. I'm obsessed with the color green. Okay, so Lynn. We have some people that love color and coffee. Hi, Kelly. Thank you for being here, Kelly. The Michael Jackson movie. Because you're obsessed with Michael. You're an 80s person, Michael. Awesome. I have not seen it yet. Maybe you can let me know if it's worth going to the theater or if I should just wait. Hi, Donna. We're glad you're here too. We hope you feel better soon. No need to apologize. Thank you for letting us know. Okay. Hummingbirds so much. See, Sarah, that's awesome. Hummingbirds. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the chat, you guys. Hi, Jamie. Jamie's another colleague of the Public Art Division City Art Collection. She does a lot of great work with our artworks that are part of the collection, a lot of conservation, a lot of emergency preparedness. So this is currently in her wheelhouse. So I'm glad she could join us, as well as Victoria Vargas and Laura. Hi, Daniel. Good to see you again from Theater West. Okay. We can keep it going. We'll use hi, Amy. I love the laugh. It's okay. No, that's okay. It was good timing. I was just going to say that you can continue to use the chat function throughout the day. I know some of you might have sent out emails to us, and we'll respond as soon as we can with anything. We're using today as a building block from the first workshop, and dive into the land of the universe, but really coming at it from a place of empowerment as something that's super valuable and meaningful, and using these workshops to really create space and time for you all. This is a moment for you to reflect, for you to take time, to take pause, and hopefully with the stipend, it kind of puts a little bit peace of mind, and you don't have to worry so much about maybe some gigs or something else, or having to make the time because it's taking away from maybe some other resources, etc. So we really hope that you can immerse yourself, as you have been doing, in this experience. And we're really glad that you're here, and grateful for your time and energy, and looking forward to we have more people rolling in, and that's totally fine. This is being recorded. Looking forward to working with you over the next few weeks as we continue on this journey of emergency preparedness. So I'll pass it to Molly, and if you want to add, or Jan, if you want to add anything else, or we can segue into the next thing. Totally fine.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for sharing in the chat. That was really lovely. And now there are new things that I'm going to want to read and crafts to try. So thank you. I also just want to reiterate Tanya's point that we are recording this for the group. The web page is private, so the link is only shared with the participants in this juried group. But also, we recognize that just talking about readiness and business continuity raises issues of vulnerability, issues of concern. We want you to feel comfortable that this is a safe space to bring up concerns, issues. And so if you're welcome to, again, stay off camera if you like. If you would prefer to anonymize your name if you're putting information in the chat, or if there is anything that you would like us to edit out of the final cut that goes online because something has come up, we are more than happy. We want to make sure that this is a safe space, and we don't want the fact that we are recording it to hinder frank and candid conversation. So, and again, if you need to step away, we're just going to keep rolling right through in respect of everyone's time, but please step away, take breaks as you need to. Okay, moving on. Just a reminder that we are working in partnership with others on this program. So the three particular elements that Tom and I are providing through NCAPER are these professional development workshops, the online office hours, and a courtesy review of the readiness plans. That is the ultimate product of this effort, is for each of you to develop your own customized readiness plan for your practice or your operation at the end of the process. Just a quick reminder of who and what NCAPER is. We are an unincorporated national coalition of the willing, private and public entities that came together after Katrina. And we've been building in the 20 years since advocacy and policy in the field, educational tools. We are a clearinghouse of information. We span all disciplines, and we also are response facilitators. So when an event happens, such as the Los Angeles wildfires, our core purpose is to provide a platform for those who are impacted to come together with others who want to be able to help with information, with resources, with connections. So that's kind of our core purpose. These are our charter member organizations. And Performing Arts Readiness, which is a program that Tom led for, I think, 9 years, sunsetted at the end of 2025. And we are really pleased that the assets and resources of Performing Arts Readiness are now housed within NCAPER. So you can find those on our website. Our agenda for today, we're going to start by just taking a bit of time to reflect on our first workshop. We would love to hear things that have stayed with you from that. Also, if you have questions or things that you would like to share and bounce off of the group. We will also reflect a little bit on our first set of office hours, which happened last week. And then we're going to jump into the content for today, which is business continuity. We'll talk about what that even means, some definitions and frameworks, how to think about what your critical business functions are, whatever the size and scope of your artistic practice, what the business continuity process means, and then we're going to take some time to do a hands-on exercise. These exercises that we're building in here hopefully will be the building blocks for your own readiness plan. We'll segue then into analyzing your business operations and thinking about strategies for both mitigating, building in protections for your work and your operations, as well as recovery strategies, and then how to actually start putting together and documenting your plan. We'll continue with the exercise, looking at your critical business functions and what are some strategies that you might come up with for your own operations. And then we'll talk about what might actually get put onto paper or onto a screen for a digital plan. We'll have some time for discussion, although at any time, if you do have questions, please either put them in the chat or raise your hand. And Tom and Tanya and Jan and I will be watching. Between the four of us, we should be able to catch those and make time during our time together. We'll be talking about a discovery documents list that might also be a building block for your plan. And finally, we'll talk about the next steps in the process. I also just want to mention, and this kind of echoes some of what Tanya brought up, but one of our colleagues who has taught with us, Molly Flanagan in Rhode Island, put together this slide, and I just think it is really important to keep as our topmost thinking is that we know that our conversation today is about responding to the worst days we may experience, and for some of you, the worst days that you have experienced. So even though we are going to be talking about logistics and kind of technicalities, really people matter the most, and so we want to always assume the best and make sure that we are working in community. This community is really important and valuable, and also that, as Tanya said, these 2.5 days that we're spending together is important because planning gives you the time and mental and emotional space to care for other people and for yourself when a crisis happens. So this really, although it may take you away from the urgent day-to-day things that are pulling at your time and attention, we really believe that taking this time now is a benefit for your peace of mind, for your ability to keep working, but also for your ability to take care of your circle when an emergency happens. And I'm going to toss it over to Tom now to start jumping into our content for today.
Great. Thank you, Molly. We have a couple of things that we're going to be emphasizing, really continuing on from information that we talked about in our first session, our live session. The first thing really here is establishing some working definitions. The idea of emergencies, crises, and disasters. These can all exist along a continuum. And what we've done is we've put together some common definitions that we've heard from artists and arts organizations in the work that we've been doing across the country. So, an emergency, smaller scale, maybe a finite period from the time of the incident through recovery. Multiple emergencies may occur during a disaster and build into a disaster. Primarily, we see emergencies having an internal impact, and they may end up resolving fairly quickly. I always put numbers onto this, and I say that it might be 1 to 100 items that might be damaged, whether you are in an art gallery or art museum or art center and you have that amount of items that gets damaged, or if you are an individual artist and it may be 1 or 10 works that would get damaged, and that would be an emergency in your case. A crisis is a significant event requiring quick decision and action, and it's really an emergency building to facing a critical point or a point of change. And I always think this is the 100 to 500 items. This is something where you probably can handle some of the emergencies on your own or with a small group. With a crisis, it becomes all hands on deck, or it might even become bringing in some outside assistance and outside help. And then disasters, really the large scale situations that might happen, impacting a lot of people, affecting infrastructure. There may be first responder or government response. It can threaten your mission and threaten the existence of your organization or your practice. And there's a lot of external impact. Response and recovery may take a very long time. We talked about in our live class the fact that when water ran into the theaters on Broadway right before their Wednesday matinees, they were actually able to call carpet cleaning companies and get that taken care of and go on with their evening shows. But they also, we talked about a library and museum that has a performing arts center that got struck by lightning, and they ended up having to be in an offsite facility, which is another thing we'll talk about today, for quite a while. And this can be 500 items or more. So just some things to think of as you're building your plan, maybe some working definitions that will work for you. The types of disasters are on our next slide, and we can talk about these in a number of different ways. The natural disasters are certainly what we see most or hear about most often, and what we'll probably build our plans around. That can be wildfires, storms, and flooding. Human-caused disasters, this can be everything from ranging from poor building construction to active shooter situations or situations where there's arson going on. Technological disasters can be everything from a power failure that might affect your theater, might affect your studio as far as lighting is concerned, or it could be the loss of a ticketing system or some type of information system that you have licensed or you use, and maybe they have a problem at the production center for that product. And then we have administrative disasters. And this is one that is getting a lot more play, a lot more focus. The idea of some of these things are funding cuts or withdrawals. There are needs for succession planning. We'll be talking about that today. Reputational disasters and communications disasters that can damage an organization, can damage a studio practice as well. So these are the kind of things that we think about. Can you build your plans around these types of disasters? On the next slide, there are some inherent risks in artistic practices in general. These are some of the risks that we might see simply because of the nature of artistic businesses. It can be tight financial margins. Revenue sources may or may not be diversified. And when we're seeing periods where some of the grants are being taken away on a federal level, especially maybe some state level, that's a concern. It may be one person or small team operations, and you have a whole bunch of competing responsibilities, including keeping the business going and, in a lot of cases, displaying or exhibiting materials or performing your practice. And you have to think about how can we think about building, against that risk. Is there a way that maybe we can network with people who are on our call, on our project, to help you expand parts of your small team operations? Stewardship, the idea of protecting and continuing unique artistic assets and processes. And this is probably one of my main interests, being able to steward your collections, your materials, your work into the future. And that tension that we hear every time between time and resources spent on any kind of administrative reflection or planning like we're doing and the creative process. So what we want to do is help so that we can assist in maybe lowering the amount of tension by providing a number of resources that will help you develop plans that can last a long time. So on our next slide, the ubiquitous, and it will probably come back for class 3 as well, disaster management cycle slide. It is an actual cycle that emergency management professionals have helped us visualize. What we can do is we have to operate through this cycle, and just think about where you would be operating and what you're doing. So a lot of what we're working on now is preparedness, preparing a plan, preparing a team, whether it's internal or in an organization or between a couple of artistic practices that you might work together on. Response, if there's flooding, if there is a need to respond from future wildfire situations, and continue to respond to the wildfires from 2025. Looking at that. Recovery. Recovery is the idea of, again, it can be short term or long term, but getting back to a position where you can continue your work and continue moving forward with your practice. And then mitigation, that's another thing we'll talk an awful lot about. It is what can you do to make sure that a disaster might not be as damaging, might not be as troublesome the next time. So we talk about what can you do to mitigate these disasters. This is a never-ending cycle in which each phase feeds into the next. And what you need to think about is, even if it's a small thing, you have a hiccup in one of your online systems that you work with for a while, just documenting a little bit about how that affected you and what you can learn for the next time is really important. So, with those sort of basic definitions, I think we can take a little bit of time to talk about our some of the things that we're doing as part of this series, and then we will go into discussion of a number of areas of starting with business continuity. So, Molly, on our next slide, you want to start us off on that? Yeah.
Sure. So, whoops. So, everything, all of these slides are really just to provide some framing and some context for the actual work that we are all doing together, which is developing a readiness plan, which is the result of an intentional decision-making process about what you do and who will do it. And this is something that we talked about in our first workshop, but we will continue to, because again, a plan is only as good as all of the thought and all of the people and decisions that went into it. That is one reason why, although we share some example plans with you, we don't advise that you just up and pick one as a template and plug your own information in. It is really thinking about your context, your scope, your operations, your mission, and then making these decisions with your team if you have one, so that you kind of have that documentation and that muscle memory and that mental memory, so that if a crisis happens, you're able to act right away. So that bit of context. Before we jump into today, though, this is a repeat of a lot of things we covered in workshop number 1. So we wanted to just open the floor for any reflections, observations, questions, or light bulb moments from those of you who were at workshop number 1. So feel free to put anything in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to share. You might have something that you went home and you said, oh, I don't remember exactly what they meant by this, or I tried this, but it doesn't really make sense with my situation. Can we talk through that? Whatever you'd like to explore. Oh, we have a quiet group today.
The in the chat, we're talking about the in-person gathering was really highly appreciated, and that was great for Molly and me as well. The introductions we got just during the breaks and at lunch were really helpful. And the second comment was, are you able to share some common themes from the office hours? And I will definitely get back to that because there were a couple of great common themes. Sarah said the first workshop, now we're getting a lot of comments. Uh, the first workshop was helpful in consolidating the aspects of emergency preparedness, including not only nuts and bolts, but also the how, why, and where, and all those sort of 5 Ws that we always hear people talk about in journalism school. Then it seems like a lot of this is geared toward business, so I'm wondering if there's more on how to create a plan for a single artist. Yes, we are really interested because this group is half and half with individual artists and arts organizations. The fact that we want to be able to have you focus on what you can do for your own practice, but also is there a way that your practice can network with other individual artists or other arts organizations so that there's some mutual aid in time of needs. A lot about the studio and how I don't have a lot of control over the structure of the building, which I have some concerns about. Roof leaking, windows that don't close all the way, etc. In the project that we're working on in the San Francisco Bay Area, one of the things that we're talking about is what can we do from our work here, the risk assessment that we do on our own building, to talk to landlords, to talk to building owners when we do see some concerns. And so I think, again, that documentation is really important. Lists of contacts that you can share that might be suitable for small organizations. Yes, definitely. One of the things that we can do is we have some good resources that are on the project website already. And what I'd say is that maybe we can go back and code those a little bit and say, really good for individual artists, etc. I think some of the resources that we have with Surf Plus and the Craft Emergency Relief Fund, and what they have done for their studio protector is really helpful as well. And Amy talking about data being stored off sites is important. And we'll be talking a little bit about how that can be in your business continuity, business resumption plan even today. I'm going to go back for just a second because we did have a question on what were some of the themes and topics from the office hours. And the idea of thinking beyond just natural disasters. That's why I was leaning on those other ones so heavily when I did that slide, is to, just the idea of thinking about the other things that might cause concern, might cause problems for your studio, might cause problems for your organization. The importance of building the cohort and building networks with artists and organizations you work with, or even meet during this project, I think is going to be really important. That whole networking thing. Molly and I were kind of astounded. In the time since we did our live class, we have had reminder after reminder from people involved in current disasters to people who are looking at building plans in Kentucky. And the call that I was just doing in Ohio, the network building is really important because it can be really helpful to get a second opinion or third or fourth opinion on some of the things that you're trying to do. And then looking at sample plans. And that was another question that is just right in front of my face in the chat right now. Do we have examples of individual artist plans? There's at least one, if not a couple of examples that Molly has a mock-up on the site, and we're identifying more of those. So there are a couple. And I did want to mention, I actually asked to have this slide added. The sessions that we're having for upcoming office hours, we'll have one on June 18th and one on, I think it actually
That's
is supposed
July
to be
8th. I'm
July
sorry,
8th.
that's a
Yeah. Okay.
typo.
Okay, no problem. So June 18th and July 8th, we'll have that on the website, but really good ideas and it's a way to talk about what you've heard in the classes, but it's also a way, and some of you I know are having this question. How does what we're talking about in the classes apply to me? How does it apply to my individual practice? I think that that is really important. So that's something that we can do. And if it gets, I'll tell you, if it gets past the July 8th office hour and you're saying, geez, I need to talk to these folks, Molly and I can either individually or as a team get together with you while you're working through development of your plan. So yeah, Molly, if we want to go to the next slide.
Right. Yes, thank you. So we talked in our first workshop about readiness plan as just kind of a big concept, and we promised that we would start to parse that out into some more specifics. So here, this graphic kind of talks about these concentric circles of a plan and the fact that it can be of different scopes. So the core, the disaster plan, the emergency plan is really knowing how you are going to act to preserve life and human safety first, followed by property, important objects and assets, as Tom talked about, your artistic assets, your data assets. So this can be in any kind of large scale disaster or emergency, whether it's natural or human caused. So this is very much the first thing that you want to have in place. The next level out is this continuity of operations plan that we will be focusing on today, which is really, and this is lingo that comes from the business sector, and we're very conscious of that. But because a lot of the interactions that you might have with business people, with insurance brokers, things like with landlords, they might use some of these terms. So we want to make sure that we're fluent in this terminology. But a continuity of operations plan, COOP plan, business continuity plan, all kind of mean the same thing, which is how you're going to restart your core business functions if they are interrupted by any kind of disruption, again, natural or human caused. The next layer out is a readiness plan, and it really encompasses both of those, but it's also broader and it looks at all aspects of your operation, facilities, people, programs, data, equipment, assets, information and communications, and thinks about how to identify and limit your risks, and also how to have a plan for how to keep those operations going. But it also kind of collects a lot of information and data in one centralized place. So it kind of goes beyond just the COOP plan. And then the final circle out here, which is something that we will not honestly really get into in this particular program, but just want you to be aware of it, is the idea of a resiliency plan. Whereas disaster plan, COOP plan, readiness plan tend to be internal about your internal operations and activities. A resiliency plan often looks more outward, and it is thinking about how you are going to adapt to the changing environment, whether we think of that as the climate environment, socio-political environment, economic environment. When those things change, shift, how are you going to be adaptable, flexible, and resilient in the face of those larger forces and changes? So since we talked about emergency response and being the core part of it, I'm going to ask Tom to just take a couple of minutes to key in on those elements since they are the most important.
Definitely. Thank you, Molly. I think what we want to do is sort of get you in the mindset of a couple of steps to take, whether you are in your studio, and resiliency definitely has a mental health component. Allie, thank you for adding that, and we will be talking about that hopefully a bit more in our third class, in the on-site class that we have coming up. With emergency response, I want you to imagine a situation. You're sitting in your office, you're sitting in your studio, and you hear a fire alarm go off. And because it is a somewhat regular happening, you sigh and look around to see if anybody else is leaving, log out of your computer, and head to the exit. But you see that there's a problem once you get outside. Smoke is streaming from your theater. Smoke is streaming from the Art Center complex. The fire department's pulled up. Ambulances arrive to assist those who are wounded in the situation. Takes about an hour for the fire to be located and put out, and then the building is cleared and the injured people are taken to the hospital. It becomes obvious to you that no one is going back to work today. So what happens tomorrow or the next day or next week? And here are the kind of things that we want you to think about. There are some questions that come up. Do performances need to be canceled or postponed? How are you going to contact those that you work with in your studio and patrons of your studio? Do you have the correct insurance? What about any information for your patrons? What about any information for people who work with your gallery or work with your process, work with your project? At this point, this is when an emergency response management team, which could be individual institution based or it could be between a number of individual artists, will step into action. The team will be the ones who make the determination as to the extent of the damage and what part of your business continuity plan needs to be used and put together. So I'm going to take a few moments on this slide. This is a really important slide to think about with how you scope your emergency plan. So I think we can discuss what should be included in an emergency response plan and the protocols that any type of team might follow. And so a couple of things. I think that the first task that you need to think about, whether you're in an organization or a network of individual artists, is to really protect the people who are on premises. Your response plan should include steps for dealing with immediate human needs in terms of evacuation, getting people out of the building, health and medical situations like personal medical issues, such as someone having a reaction to heat or heat exhaustion. Active shooter situations, when one or more armed individuals are on the premises intentionally inflicting harm, what type of steps can we build in there? And then individual or group safety. And this can be, and we've heard about this in a couple of different settings, threats to personnel arising from bullying, assault, or other aggressive behavior, from personal grudges, by disgruntled or terminated employees, and domestic violence that intrudes into the workplace. We need to make sure we think of all of those areas. The next most important task after protecting personnel is to prevent expansion of any type of the event or disaster. And I think we need to make sure that we're looking at the safety of our facility, shutting down equipment and processes if you need to, protecting assets. If it's a cyber event, we are going to be talking about that, an IT disaster response plan as we go along today. Non-cyber IT, like application outages that are beyond your control, is important. It refers to those type of things, or your server for ticket processing is down. How do you address that? How do you process tickets, payments, other regular everyday business that you're doing? And then we also want to talk about any brand impact. What plans for dealing with matters that might harm your artistic studio's brand or your organization's brand is important. Um, Think about addressing the following areas. Patron safety, personnel, both management and non-management, in case employees are accused of non-work related illegal conduct, in case of a patron slipping and falling on the steps because they weren't maintained correctly, ethical situations, an executive of the firm is accused of illegal business practices. What can you do to handle those emergencies? 911 probably won't help with some of those. You need to think about what you can do internally with that. Evacuate your emergency response team. And when we talked about this at our first session, I had a couple of hands go up, and I had definitely a lot of people talking with me during some of the breaks. And you said, we are in an individual organization, an individual studio, individual arts practice. We don't have a team. What we're thinking about, though, is can you talk with and work with other artists to develop a loosely knit team in case a disaster happens and get training by looking at the risks that are in your building, by looking at ways to do some levels of recovery from some of these disaster situations to get that group built up. If the scale warrants, create an emergency operations center. We often see about these type of things on TV and movies, et cetera, where we have people, in a large scale making some decisions on what emergency operations might happen. But we also want you to think about this. Is your studio or is part of your office going to become an emergency operations center? What you want to do is take a look at having a center for the person in charge of the containment and recovery efforts. Think about operational control and how your operations can move forward, and then recovery planning. Assess the impact. This is next to doing risk assessment. Impact assessment is where I really try to focus a lot of what we do. So with people, assess condition of your practice or organization staff, performers, and patrons. Your venue, your physical facility is important to look at. What is the situation with your technical capabilities? We're going to talk a lot about communication as we go on. And so that will be something else that's important in assessing the impact. Has your communication from your studio been reduced or cut down? And then finally, the idea of functional impact. Based on the facility, equipment, technology, communication, and people impacts, what is the current state of your artistic business, of your artistic operations? We need to keep people informed. Information about the event and its impact should be disseminated in an intentional, controlled, and thoughtful manner, and it should be done promptly and proactively. I think if you can do that, you avoid the idea of the media coming to you and saying, what's happening? And you might not be as prepared. If you can build communications into your disaster plan, I think that's going to be helpful to get that information out there. And especially with the impact of social media, get the correct information out before misinformation is posted. I just had a really interesting story that I read from the Cleveland Plain Dealer editorial staff where they named one organization having unethical business practices, but unfortunately, it was another organization with almost the same name, which was really the unethical group. And they said it took 7 people 24 hours to chase down where everything went on social media and get things corrected to a good point. So we need to think about that communications extending out. And we're going to talk a lot about emergency response planning and activities as we go into our next class. Now, on our next slide, I want you to look at the next slide and not, pass out from how long it is. And there are a lot of things that you might include that in as content in your plan. The first three things are definitely for organizations and not individual practices. But I think if we start with number 4, where we started in our last class, the risk assessment and mitigation goals and action steps. And then preparedness and response basics, which I have been talking about. We could go on today. And then we'll talk a lot about how to make sure we cover all of these areas and get them back up and running today. So what I want you to think about is how many of these specific points are things that are included in your business, in your artistic practice, and how do we make sure to address them? So again, we can hold this up. We're probably going to take bits and pieces. Today we're doing a lot of discussion on preparedness and response basics, and we'll do that in the third class as well. So before we start talking about business continuity, sorry, Molly, we can go to the next slide. Before we talk about business continuity, I want to talk about why would we do this? So I want you to think about which diagram would you rather have and rather be using if a disaster happens at your studio, at your organization? The ones where you sort of spin it like, unfortunately, a game and then take action, or would you rather have something that already has the actions planned out for you? So, and the disaster happens, and you've appointed a team leader with no experience. Scramble to find alternate locations because your business is going to be closed, your studio has to be closed. Trying to recover lost data and unfortunately closing down the organization. We see this happening. But one of the things that we can do on the other diagram, on the other side of the slide here, is we can do an analysis of the impact. We can put together some recovery strategies and develop a plan and test and maintain the plan. And I think that the most important reasons to really think about business continuity at all, and we talk about business continuity, continuity of operations. I want to really call it artistic continuity here for our classes. How do we keep the artistic continuity going? Um, I think that if you have this type of plan, it'll save lives when, not if, a disaster strikes. The survival of your organization can depend on it. It's only a matter of time before disasters or emergencies happen. It meets your obligation to your sponsors, donors, patrons, to exercise a minimum standard of care and preparedness. And in some cases, it's the law. And without a business continuity plan, your top executives in your organization could face criminal charges, heavy fines, and even jail time. We see this in some states, I'm not sure how this applies in California. This will be something that we can look at again, but there are some legal ramifications that we need to think about and talk about in order for you to have the plan to get the business going and again being able to recover and move forward. And it is good business. Business continuity planning will help you maintain service to your patrons, your customers, your partners. It'll protect assets, and if you have them, employees, and minimize financial losses and reputational damage. So with those things in mind, we've got the why and the sort of getting away from that first terrible diagram to the good diagram. And I think Molly can start us from there.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Um, we're going to go into some more granular concepts around business continuity, but I'm going to start with this box of things to consider. And I would say that these are considerations we recommend throughout this entire area of work that we are doing together. First of all, everything that we are offering are ideas, food for thought. You need to decide and take from all of this what works for you. And even on that long list of elements that might be in your plan, you want to take these considerations in mind as well in terms of scale and scope. There was some conversation in the chat about some of the sample plans that are on the website. There are plans that are 40 pages. There's a sample plan that I think is like 22 pages. And there's a mock-up of a solo artist plan that is 2.5 pages. So there is no right or wrong. You want to make sure that it is of the scale, no bigger or smaller than is appropriate for your scope of work, appropriate to your discipline. Some of what we talk about will have more relevance if you are a maker of visual art or tangible, as opposed to performing artists, musicians. Think about your location. Again, there was some information in the chat about, I'm in a space and my landlord isn't taking care of necessarily keeping my space hazard free. So if you rent, own your space, what is the condition of your space? All of that. Look, are you in a location that has hazards? I mean, I've been tracking on the news, these folks who had to be evacuated because of the chemical tank. And so, Tom talked about this in our first workshop, are there industrial sites or infrastructure or traffic hubs around you that make your risks particular? Your own capacity. How much of this can you do? Don't bite off more than you can chew. Take all of this in bite sizes, and that is fine. Mostly align with your values. What is your mission? What is your artistic mission? What is your community mission? All of this, you can make these choices about what are your own priorities, and what is important for you to protect and save based on your own values and your mission. And lastly, I said this last time, I'll say it again, start where you are. There is no guilt about what you have or haven't done in the past. We believe that you have a lot of both information and skills that are already innate to you and are going to serve you well in putting your plan together. But we're all starting where we are and just building from there. So just want to say that is kind of overall in our work together. So we're going to run through just again some kind of core information on an introduction to this whole idea of business continuity, what that process is, and then some of the specifics that are likely to relate to you. We've plucked out, which are IT, disaster recovery planning. We've touched, but we will touch again on emergency response planning and succession planning. And this does not just relate to those of you who work in a team, but also if you are a solo practitioner, even if you are temporarily sidelined because of an injury or an accident or something great happens, you go on Wheel of Fortune and you win a trip, whatever it is, you want to make sure that there is some way to fill that gap while you are gone unexpectedly. So some definitions again. Business continuity is defined as the capability of an entity or practice to continue delivering your products or services, those that are mission critical, following any kind of disruptive incident. So what we're talking about today, business continuity planning, is starting to create systems of both prevention and recovery to deal with potential threats. So the goal is to enable your ongoing critical operations. And again, this may be your programming. It might be those activities that drive revenue. That is, again, totally based on your own mission and core needs and activities. This, Tom has, I think, done a very good uh, put forth a very strong case about why do business continuity, but we are seeing increasing disasters, federal disasters, which are declared only at the largest scale. There were almost 120 last year, but we know just from our work in the field that these daily, quote, mundane and local emergencies and crises can be just as devastating. Mold in your studio. Suddenly your board chair is sick and is unable to get to your gala. All of those kinds of things that never make the news, but can be really powerfully harmful to you. Without a business continuity plan, research shows that 40% of small businesses don't immediately open after a disaster happens. 25% of them close within a year and 75% fail within 3 years. That is not what we want for you. That is not what Tanya and her department want for you. We are here to help you be sustainable and resilient. So in thinking about business continuity, we want to keep in mind the disaster scale and what your priorities are. We know that it is also important because communities rely on artists and arts experiences after a crisis. So your ability to continue to operate isn't just about you, but it is about the community writ large. And again, necessary to carry out your mission, to maintain your revenue stream if you employ others, and to secure artistic and other types of assets. So some definitions. And again, these are taken from the commercial side, but it's worthwhile to have some fluency in this language for when you're communicating with others. Business continuity planning, again, is what we're going to delve into today with some exercises to identify vulnerabilities that might cause losses to your organization. So how do you plan to continue to conduct your business? Looking at IT recovery planning. Thank you. I saw in the chat someone who, after our last workshop, said, yes, I've been working on protecting my hard drives. I've been backing up my data. Kudos to you. Emergency response planning, which is protecting life safety and the environment. And then again, emergency succession planning, making sure that leadership is in place, whether that is for planned or unplanned situations. So as we jump into this business continuity, I'm going to ask you to start thinking about these. You can make notes to yourself or just think mentally about these. But first of all, it's about defining your values. What do you care most about? What do you need to continue to deliver, to continue to do that is most core to the reason that you do your work? That's number one. Number two, define what your objectives are. Which operations and systems, if any, need to return to full operation immediately? And this might be less true for some of you and more true for others. For instance, if you are a host organization and other organizations rent your space and they have performances coming up and audiences coming in, getting your facility back up and running might be your most critical thing. If you are an independent operator and you can just, work from home or pick up your systems in a day or two, and there's going to be no major fallout from that, that's up to you to decide. So you need to be thinking about that for yourself. Are there things that can wait 24 or 48 hours or longer than that? And lastly, what needs protecting in the event of a disruption? If your operations are cut off, are there things around data, around safely protecting your site, around safely protecting your artwork? So, start thinking about these things for your particular business continuity plan. Because again, your plan is a result of your own decision-making around these kinds of questions. So this will be starting to sketch out your plan structure. What might actually be in this element of your business continuity plan, which is going to be part of your larger readiness plan? You might have an intro and purpose how to use this, particularly if you are part of a team, whether that's a large team or a small team. You want someone to be able to pick it up, or you can point to it and say, okay, if we are, if an internet outage happens in the region, or if we are suddenly flooded, this is what you pick up and this is how to use it. Here's our business continuity plan. These are the people who are tasked with taking certain steps to recover. This is the scope of the plan. And then these are the steps and processes to get things back up and running again. And then you want to always make sure that you are testing this, training and drilling it so that it becomes just part of your nature. So again, suggestions of elements that you might decide to put into your business continuity plan. Could be more complicated than this, but these are the core elements we would recommend. So we're going to offer you 4 steps to developing your business continuity plan, starting with your impact analysis. Then we're going to look at some mitigation and recovery strategies. Finally, how do you actually take that analysis and thinking about those strategies to do your own plan development? And then finally, talk about testing and exercising that. Again, this might sound a little business jargony, and we are well aware of that. So the first is your business impact analysis, gathering your key people, gaining consensus on which of those operations and systems are most critical. Again, what needs to be brought back up to running right away, what might be able to wait longer, identifying top risks, and then breaking down your critical operations and systems into their steps. So you literally can think about, okay, these are the 3 steps I need to make to get my my studio back open if I had to leave. So again, breaking these down into some doable steps. So starting with these key people, you need to decide who's going to be involved, who understands how your critical systems operate. If you have an organization, this could be the heads of departments or people who run specific functions. This might include some board members or some key volunteers. And again, to echo Tom, if you work in an individual practice, you might consider teaming up with some other artists that might be close geographically to you or work in the same discipline. So there's a knowledge base there to help each other to develop your business continuity plan, and maybe even then to be a battle buddy for each other if you need to step in when something happens. You want to think about what are the core functions that need to get back up and running right away in these areas. These are 8 buckets that you have seen before that we recommend are ways you might break out your overall readiness plan into these areas of your programming, which for an individual artist or ensemble could be your art making, your people, staff, volunteers, audiences, board, whatever those might be, your facilities, whether you own, rent, borrow, IT and data, communications, both internal and external, everything around finances, insurance, and legal issues, thinking about all of your inventory, your assets, and your collections, and then your community. Are you interacting with your community? Are there things that you need to get back up and running in order to be to live up to the community responsibilities that you have? So again, just to reiterate, you want to decide of your functions in these 8 buckets, which are mission critical, that must always remain operational, or that you need to get them up and running right away. We recognize that this is going to be different if you're a hospital than if you're an arts organization. I had a wonderful colleague, Teresa Hollingsworth, who used to, when we would get kind of frenzied, she would say, we're not putting kidneys in people. And it was a good reminder that you always have to keep a sense of scale about what you're doing. But there are mission critical things for you that you're going to want to get up and running as quickly as possible. Then other immediate services, and then there's going to be a whole slew of things that are going to fall under your normal operations. You can wait until things have calmed down, return to normal, then you get those back up and going again. So we're going to take some time to do an exercise, and I'm going to ask you to think about what your top 3 mission critical functions are. And I actually used this as an opportunity to think about this for NCAPER. So I'm going to share my example and then give you about 5 minutes for you individually to work on this. So the NCAPER, or the Coalition for Arts Preparedness and Emergency Response. So when I look at all of the things that we do, to me, our top three are our response facilitation calls. If a disaster happens somewhere, we need to be able to get in touch with people locally, find out how they are, find out if there's anything that they need immediately. And then as soon as they are ready, to gather everybody on a Zoom to get status reports, to start to do outreach to artists and organizations that might have been impacted and find out what they need. So that's number one. Number two would be our communications. So making sure that we can get information out there in terms of response and recovery resources through our website, through our social media, through our email list. And then our third critical is really our people. We're a two-person operation. And then we have our steering committee. So we always need to make sure that if one of us is missing, that there is someone else who's ready and able to step in. I looked at our other functions in those 8 buckets, the things that could wait, things like our steering committee meetings, our classes and trainings, no events, our publications, the arts administration programs that we teach at, our policy and advocacy. Those are not unimportant, but those are second priority. So I picked those top three, our people, our communications, and our response facilitation calls, and that's the why. So again, I'm gonna time us and give us 5 minutes for you to work individually, think about your top 3 mission functions and why. I'm gonna go back to, this slide so you can think about these different areas from which to draw. And then after 5 minutes, we're going to come back. And if you would like to, you can either share in the chat what yours are, or if you're willing to raise your hand and just share what came to mind for you and why. I think that would be helpful for us to hear from each other. So y'all have 5 minutes to work on this. 2 minutes. Right. Let's all come back. And is there anyone who's interested in sharing the results of their exercise? Or ran into challenges trying to do it? I'm not seeing any raised hands, but team, let me know if I've missed them. Oh, thank you. Marcian, as an individual artist and depending on the circumstance, number one, make sure all the administrative tasks are of managing my life are in order so I can do the job of being an independent artist. That's great. Also, your life basics. Make sure the administrative tasks of being an artist are still moving and keep seeking opportunities. Great. Number two, alert other colleagues, friends, and family of the situation. And number three, keep making artwork at whatever level is possible in the emergency. Great. And then as an arts worker, critical number one, to survey impacted artists. Critical number two, raising awareness for impacted artists. And number three, raising money for impacted artists. Wonderful. Thank you.
We have a raised hand from Stina, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes, Stina. It's short for Christina.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I for Hollywood Fringe, I put communications as a top one because we are sort of an umbrella organization. We facilitate communications between our independent artist producers who are participating in our festival. And so like just getting communications like back up and running as quickly as possible so that we're sharing information between our organization, the venues that participate in our festival, and the artists that participate at those venues. And then I wrote down people, I guess. I wasn't exactly sure, like, I guess to me this sort of falls under communications, but just like we're a pretty small team, staff wise. So making sure that like we're all checked in with one another and communicating with one another. So I don't know if that falls under communications still or how that, I don't know. Like it seems like a sort of a fuzzy boundary between like communications and people. But so yeah, like just making sure that our team is like all like checked in and like doing okay and that we're covering for each other if somebody's not able to manage like their department. And then because our festival is only one portion of the year, but I was thinking of it in terms of if an emergency happened during our festival, then then getting programming back up and running, because that's what all of our art, like, our artists are like main mission, and like making arts financially accessible for our artists. And so like getting shows back up and running as quickly as possible so that they can so that their shows can go on and they can still have audiences, and that we wouldn't have to be like refunding a bunch of tickets and whatnot, and so that the artists can still get that income from what they've been working towards.
Thank you. That's great to have, some of the details of what people would think about. So that is good. I saw Barry had you had your hand up, but you may have put something in the chat since then. But anyone else want to add anything in person? We have a lot of really great information in the chat. Lynn.
Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand. I've done it on other Zooms, but so like I said in the chat, Stina, I thought of such the same things, like those two things that are kind of communication, but they're slightly different. And then on that note, something that sparked in my head the last time we had our in-person meeting was so I'm with Dance Camera West, and we don't work in a central place. We're in different spots. So let's say there's a big emergency in the region. Well, first I was thinking we should have the contact information of a significant other, because there's some type of emergency and you're like, I can't get a hold of her. Oh, I've got her husband's number. Like I never even thought of that until our first meeting. But then I was thinking it would also be great to have a significant other's contact information in another state. Like there's an earthquake, there's a flood, you're probably, if you can be in touch at all, you're still in touch with your kid at college, or so just thinking beyond, thanks to you guys and these offerings. That was just one other thing I wanted to add.
Thank you. And if I could just observe, thank you both for sharing. First of all, the kind of 8 buckets are just framing devices. They are not hard and fast. And of course, there are choices that they could fall in one or the other or both. So, you don't choose the framing that works for you. But also, Stina, I really appreciated kind of that situational awareness that in one situation, your priority is going to be different than in another time of year. So that's a great way of thinking if when you do events and things is situations may change your priorities. So it's great. Anyone? Yes, Beth.
Okay, I figured out how to unmute. How techy of me. I'm very untech. I'm a violist, I'm a musician. My viola is 380 years old, and that's where my technology lies, I like to say. So I have a conservatory of music. It's a 501c3. We have well over half of our students on full or partial scholarship. The only color we don't do is the color of not practicing. Everybody else, if they have the heart and dedication and they want to work and be there, we make music. We make music with students of all different levels. And one of our very prideful things is that we're able to get all sorts of students. I just got a young man whose mother's from El Salvador on a full ride to UCLA for composition and viola performance. And that's kind of how we roll. And, we did the pandemic, and that was when what I feel like our emergency plan is I had no idea in my life there'd be a pandemic, but there it was. And so we had to kind of be very in the moment to figure out what to do. And so we went remote for a while, and we had all sorts of programming, remote programming theory classes. The internet is not good for, playing together. We figured out how to layer things and do things. And then as we got ready to come back into in-person rehearsals, we found a space. Our CFO helped us find a space, and we got loans. We basically were very in the moment, figuring out what to do as we went, and to continue to provide services to people. And now, now we're back fully up and running. And what some of the things that have been difficult for us, as far as emergencies or whatever, is ICE agents I have a very high, many Hispanic students in my program, And so ICE comes into their neighborhood and suddenly my students can't come out. And, now when we're stopping, 20 kids between the ages of 5 and 18 from making music, from making art, that's a problem. We started to do things like I run a many level orchestra, so kids or students come in and out. We have adults also in our programs. So we had parent volunteers, we had to close the doors and kids would knock to come into rehearsal, so nobody could just walk in. We're in a different facility now and it feels safe. But like the things that are important to me, we barter space for services. We're in a place called HTLA, and they very much just like art. There's high tech Los Angeles, and they're like scientists, and they want music getting made on their campus. And so we're there. We found like a really good home for ourselves and for our students. In an emergency, most important thing for me, we're not there every day. We're there like 4 or 5 hours a week on a Thursday, would be to take care. Like I can't leave a child. They would all have to move in with me. I can't leave a kid by themselves if there's an earthquake or some weird thing that happens. So it's about kind of like about people, not the facility per se, because we'll find a way to make music or to do what we have to do any way we have to do it, but that we're able to keep students safe, And so that's primarily our goal. Everything else, like, we carry our instruments with us. If I lost a few music stands and a couple timpani, I can live with that. But it's the people stuff, like keeping students safe. And we do have students in our program between the ages of like 5 and 75. So my emergency plan is to keep students safe. And that's the main thing that we need to do. And then to keep being able to get out there and make music with them and make art and keep that alive, So it's like a different, I'm hearing individual artists and I'm hearing what their story is, and it's very valid but very different than what we would need to do in an emergency.
As it should be. Yes. Thank you, Beth. And I love that you pointed out the things that you can afford to lose as well, because in just a moment, Tom's going to start talking about risk assessment. And that's part of it is what are the greatest risks? What are the things that are most important and what is going to be less important? Those are choices to make. Great. There's a lot of great information in the chat. So thank you. For purposes of time, I think we're going to go back and have Tom talk a little bit about risk assessment. So let me go back to sharing.
Okay. So this will be familiar to everyone because we talked a little bit about this in our last class. I want to revisit risk from our last session and have you think about doing this risk assessment, and it's going to populate your business impact analysis. I think that we talked about that business impact analysis and we had Molly's grid there. Well, we can think about a lot of that and putting that right into that grid. So definitely gathering key people. For an artist, it might start with just you and expand out to include, as we've talked about, significant others, partners, close friends, studio mates, building mates, nearby artists. Gain consensus on which operations and systems are critical. Please think about what you put in the chat here and what you had felt was most important, because that's going to be really important to building into your plan that you're going to be developing. So gaining consensus there. Identifying the top risks. We talked about this. What are the things that are the most likely? And that's going to depend on where you live, the content of your work. Is protest likely or possible? Molly and I are working with a group where they are trying to address those issues. And the size and function of your practice.
I'm calling from a local nonprofit arts organization that's working
Yes.
with Council District 3 right now
Yes.
to beautify the streets.
Hmm.
And we're interested in potentially talking to you all about putting up a free mural on the wall, next to your blue tile, the big white wall. This is a fully funded project. Everything would be maintained with anti-graffiti coating, and we have professional muralists that would come out and paint. So I wanted to hopefully set up a time to speak with somebody about this potential.
That would
Well,
be
let's take that conversation offline, I think. Thanks.
And
Was there-
yeah, I think let's talk a little bit more about the identifying the risks and the hazards, and think about the direction we can go with that. There are a number of scenarios that might happen here. How would you continue your operations if one of these situations happen? Day two of a 3-day outdoor festival, which you are either running or you are participating in as an artist. There's heavy wind and rain. How do you secure the booth and the equipment and the artwork? How do you safely load out and leave? These are the kind of things that we need to think about. A hacker gets into your system, hijacks your patron or donor database, and then steals the identities. How will you repair the damage there? A powerful earthquake strikes in the middle of the day. There's structural damage to your facility. Some employees are accounted for. What actions will you take? Your artist co-op studio and gallery is located in the same street as a courthouse, and there is a controversial case that's being tried, and there are protests outside of your building. How are you going to safeguard staff and maintain operations? Think about this. Are any of these things possible that you would see or have seen at your practice or your facility? And think about planning as the answer to your questions here. And it's the answer to the questions of what if. We had an example of unrest near a venue. A museum director had to go and be online and actually on camera talking about reestablishing trust after police use their campus to stage response to protests. Director and executive from a museum said that museum security employees granted the police permission to park at a museum within blocks of the protests over the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis without the director being aware of it. As soon as he learned about it, he contacted the police and asked them to leave, and the cars departed. There was still an outcry on social media with commenters questioning the museum's commitment to diversity and racial justice. And the director said, I reacted instinctively and said, this is the wrong time and the wrong place, and about the police presence. He was chagrined by the sight of the police cars in the museum parking lot. He was just as surprised by it as the commenters were. And he said, our actions speak loudly with the hurt that society is going through. The time that the police were there hurts. So you need to think about this can be happening every day because of many types of situations. This can be one of those administrative disasters as well. So think about those type of things. Think about the hazards that you lined up that you rank toward the top. And this is just a brief exercise. We won't take time to do this, but I want you to come back to this slide. And we will be posting all the slides on the web page, but come back to this slide, identify potential hazards that you have, and then think about what their impact would be. How seriously would this crisis affect your operations? And how likely is it that the crisis would occur, given your location, your discipline, and your assets? Run some type of calculation here. You might have a weekend water leak that soaks file boxes that are flat on the ground and contains your business record. The likelihood is a two. It is pretty likely, and the impact could be not completely damaging to your practice, but it could be damaging to some of your records. So that would be a two as well and have a four total. So I would say think about the likelihood and impact rating. One would be an improbability, two would be a possibility, and 3 would be a strong possibility, or it has happened before. And we did a little bit of this with the grid that we put together when we were live at Theater West. But I want you to think about taking this type of scale and applying it to some of the risks that we've talked about here today. Molly, is there anything else? I know that you've used this pretty successfully. Anything else on the hazard assessment that you would suggest?
Just this is something that I have learned, and it kind of goes back to Beth, the comment that I think Beth had about, making your choices, is that I can tend to think about worst case scenarios, where lightning's going to strike my house and burn it down. Well, the impact of that would be a 3 because that would be devastating, but the likelihood of that happening is really low compared to, a pipe breaking and flooding my basement. So, that's why, just kind of thinking through the likelihood versus the impact can help you make some of those choices. And also, I have worked with boards, and some of them who work in business use this regularly in their own business. And so this is a really good way for them to understand how you've been thoughtful about making your choices. So,
Okay, thank you.
mhm. Okay, so we've gone through this kind of impact analysis. The next step is to think about what are some strategies that you can put into place for mitigation and recovery. Mitigation is always the best place to start because it is protecting. But then recovery, if something happens and you do need to come back from less than desirable position. So some of the steps here would be to research or gather your documents that you have and what some of your resource requirements might be. And then to think about those gaps between what you might need and what you currently have. That's what that second box means. What do you have versus what do you need? What some of those options would be. So kind of play them out as a mental or a tabletop exercise. And then from all of those, you're going to select what your strategies are and put them into your plan. So how do we break down those 4 pieces? The first, again, is to look at that analysis that you've just done, look at those top 3 critical operations you decided on, and what the most likely or impactful risks are going to be, and start putting those onto paper. So what are some of those documents with the actions that you would take and the responsibilities? As an example, you might need to have alternate suppliers. If you Tom's example, if you were flooded and you know that you're going to need someone to come in to clean the carpets, do you have more than one vendor that you are aware of that? So if one can't get to you for 3 days, there's someone else that you can call on. Is there someone that you might need to switch suppliers temporarily? I know a lot of us during COVID, supply chains were cut off or delayed. So if you are, if there is something that is really central to your operations, some sort of supply or equipment that you need, making sure that you are able to get that. What are the tools and resources and people that you're going to need if you have to repair your facilities after a disaster? If one of your greatest risks is that you need to keep your programs going, what kind of backups of people might you need, artistic and administrative personnel? You also might think about, I'm going to need something that is typically automated. I'm going to need to do manually. If you need to be able to sell tickets, but the internet is down, do you have the ability to take checks and cash? It's a really basic one of those. And then think about the gaps between, okay, this is what I need to be able to do, but am I able to do that with the current resources that I have on hand? I might need insurance. I might need to do cross training so that if a key person is absent, someone else is able to do their job. I might need to have some reserves fund set aside for emergencies or rainy days. I might need to have UPS, an uninterrupted power source or generators. I might need to have written procedures. Maybe I am a small team and we think everything is in our head, but you need to write things down. I started this work right after Katrina, and I remember hearing a story about a jeweler in New Orleans who was in another state when Katrina hit. And harking back to those days, everybody assumed that if you live in New Orleans, you're used to hurricanes, and this would happen. You're going to evacuate, get 200 miles away, and in 3 or 4 days, you're going to go back. Well, that obviously didn't happen, but those were the conditions most people were operating under. This jeweler had a 2-story studio in New Orleans. The bottom was the showroom, and the top was the studio and storage. And he was at a festival out of town, but he had written down what should happen in case of a hurricane. And so he had 2 part-time studio assistants. They were able to go to those written procedures, which included taking the inventory from the showroom, moving it upstairs, securing it, taking some other steps to secure the space, and leaving. He was able to start shipping work out within a month after Hurricane Katrina, when almost no other artists in New Orleans were able to operate. So these things do work. And then cloud-based backups, the 3-2-1 rule, which we talked about last time, which is 3 copies of important data and information in 2 different mediums like cloud-based and paper. And Tom, I'm forgetting the number. Oh, here we go. 3 total copies of data, the original and 2 backups, stored on 2 different types of media, such as a local hard drive and in the cloud, and one of those copies being stored offsite. And some of you suggested even having that in another state, which I think is really smart. So again, thinking about what, if these are the things I need to restart operations, what are those capacities? What are those resources? And what do I need to put into place? Beth, did you have a question?
Molly, if you want to keep it on this slide for just 1 second.
Sure.
Really interesting. When we were talking at the first class at Theater West, these were some of the biggest questions that came up. Insurance questions, thinking about reserve funds, thinking about some of those tech areas. And this is a class that we've actually been teaching in a couple of cases since the beginning of this year. But it is something that we're finding as sort of the through line among a lot of people putting their plans together. So that was sort of an aha moment for me to see that. But yeah, let's talk about some of the recovery strategy options, which is on the next slide, I believe. Yes. And this is related to some of the things that Molly has been talking about, but we're going to expound upon them from here. The idea of hazard mitigation. What can we do? We've identified those hazards, and what can we do to mitigate or make it less severe, the damage they can do? What can we do for prevention, protection, putting that list that the jeweler had, together for our own work? Alternate locations, very important. I probably told a story, I think, at the first class, but I'll revisit that on having alternate locations when something big happens, like the Hurricane Harvey in the Houston area. What vendors and services can you work with? And what are trustworthy vendors and services? We have in the library, archive, museums world that I've been working in for now almost 30 years, some specific vendors and services that we've seen work with disasters from Hawaii to Alaska and help people. And then the internal and external communications and how important those things are. So just for a moment, let's take a look at hazard mitigation on our next slide. And we want to talk about the actions to reduce or eliminate the long-term risks caused by hazards or disasters, address those obvious risks, which many of you had already talked about, and then we need to think about the environmental shifts, what's happening with climate situations, with new development, new neighbors, are reasons to review your hazard mitigations. I am speaking to you from the east part of the valley in the Phoenix area and the Valley of the Sun, and we are having new development like crazy, and we really need to watch out what's going to happen with that in case of future disaster situations. And when quantifying your risk exposure, consider the time impact relates specifically to your critical functions. So thinking about your time away that you might have to spend because of a disaster being as important. So here, just thinking the cost of disasters continue to rise. Governments and citizens must find ways to reduce hazard risks. Communities need to plan for new development and improvements to existing infrastructure, and mitigation can and should be an important component of your planning effort and an important component of the city's planning efforts. I was just actually at a council meeting for our neighborhood talking about some risks and threats that have come up over the past 2 or 3 months that we're looking at. So use your risk equals probability times impact calculation to determine which risks to develop mitigation steps around, which risks to develop your plan around. And so, if you're in a humid area or if you've got high humidity in your building, check for mold. If you're in a place that doesn't typically receive snow, then it does. What do you do? Now, I know most of you probably are not going to receive snow, and we do have a snow story that actually points out some other things that we want to talk about. But think about those risks that you figured out in our first class, and then what we could do to mitigate them. And with the idea of prevention and protection, these are areas where, hold on a moment here.
You want me to take this one, Tom?
Yeah, if you could, this is a little bit out of my order here. So yes, if you would, that would be great.
Sure. So again, these are ways to either prevent a risk from impacting you or protecting it so that the risk is as minimal as possible. And common ways to do this involve insurance, policies and practices, the way you go about your business, physical modifications, and then making sure that you have access to emergency services. So, for instance, insurance, we're going to talk in a minute about that, but policies and practices, knowing that staff might be able to work remotely or requiring that, twice a year, you're going to do a walk around of your facility to check for hazards. Those are the kinds of things that you can just institute as part of your ongoing activities. So it looks like a very intimidating list. These are potential types of insurance that either as an artist or as a nonprofit you might want to consider. Nobody is going to need all of these, but we just wanted to ask you to think about this because the lack of proper insurance can really be devastating. I don't think I need to convince you all of that. But for instance, there are general liability and commercial and property policies. And if you are an independent artist and you have a home studio, you are, using borrowed space, you probably want to look at getting a separate insurance policy because your standard homeowners is not going to cover either your activities or your property that you use for business. So think about that. If you are an artist that performs at a festival or shows your work there is particular insurance for that. Special events and concerts hold their own risks when you're dealing with large crowds and security. There's special insurance for that. Obviously, you should have workers' comp if you have employees. So this is kind of a laundry list, but just want you to think about this and talk with your insurance agent or broker about which of these are going to be the most relevant to your situation. And again, it's a risk versus reward kind of calculation that you're going to have to make. Some of these are non-negotiable, but some are choices that you can make depending on the level of coverage and the cost. Then looking at, sorry, this is the snow case study that Tom promised, and we're actually borrowing this from a colleague in Rhode Island. But this is something that just happened earlier this spring, which is there was an unexpectedly large blizzard, and this made the news because I think it was the most snowfall that they had had in history or since recording. So this was a small mom and pop run music venue downtown, and it was closed because of the snow buildup. So if you think about all of the steps that we recommended you do, this is how to think about those in this particular situation. In terms of thinking about what you're researching your documents and your resource requirements. Do you know who would communicate with the ticket holders since they're obviously not going to be able to get in the building? How about the performers and the staff? Who is going to update the social media and website? Who actually was responsible for going down and looking at the venue to see what the status was? Who prepares the building when you know that bad weather is coming? And what are those preparations? These are the things that you want to decide ahead of time and write down. Do you have a snow removal vendor? You know, a lot of people were asking for snow removal. So when you think about what are your greatest risks, you might want to make sure that you have somebody on call who is going to take your call. Maybe that's your IT support system, obviously, rather than snow. Then think about identifying the gaps between your recovery needs and current capabilities. If you don't have any snow removal vendors, if you don't have an IT guy to call, that is going to put you on your heels. And then exploring your recovery strategy options. In this case, this venue crowdsourced a list. So there were other folks in their immediate neighborhood. So they got together to talk about snow removal. And they also make sure that they're in contact with the pizza place across the street who typically delivers food during the concert. So they needed to know what the plan was. So again, it's just kind of thinking through these things, making the decisions and writing them down ahead of time so that you can implement them when you need to.
Great. Thank you, Molly. And I think with that case study, we talked about that as a snow situation. Thinking about it in what I've been talking to people in the Dayton, Ohio area about, they've had in the past 3 days 7 inches of rain, and they're having two more today. And I know that that's something that might be more of a possibility to happen in LA, but all of the kind of things that Molly talked about apply to any sort of large scale disaster. And the other thing that I was going to say was when Molly had constructed that laundry list of insurance, when I saw that slide, I said, oh, this is going to scare everybody half out of their wits because there's so many types of insurance on there. But what we're thinking about is really, as Molly said, following up. Which of these apply to you because you're not going to have to get all of them. So definitely those other two slides are really important. So I think we can go on to another topic here, and the idea of thinking about emergency succession planning. It is difficult for any of us to think about illness, injury, death, or sudden resignation or dismissal of key people. And under the stress of an emergency, without having something prepared, an unplanned departure can throw the organization into turmoil with adverse consequences. And putting together an emergency succession planning activity is really important, especially for key positions, but I think really if you can, for as many positions as possible within your organization. If you have a succession plan, it can take the emergency part of things out of the equation. So what you do is getting this plan together, prepare the organization for an unexpected transition. So again, there are a number of steps here. I've been working a lot on this over the past 3 years as part of a project that I will, in a little bit, put a resource in line for. But I wanted to go through this real quickly, but in a little bit of a detailed manner for us how to think about an effective plan. And this is important whether you are in an organization, whether you are in a loosely aligned group of artists, or whether it is your own individual arts operation or studio. Thinking about what would happen if you or if another leader was had to step out of the picture for a bit. So, establishing a leadership transition team. The team would be looking at ensuring the short-term organization operations continue in case of an unplanned staff or executive departure. The team could include a combination of board members, community stakeholders, donors, volunteers, patrons who have a strong investment in the organization. Clarifying board responsibility, clear expectations about their roles and responsibilities. We have seen people have their board step in when an executive director had to step away for one reason or another. And having a frank discussion now between the executive and the board during this planning process is important. Identifying an interim executive director or an interim business director. We've seen that recruiting a new executive director, a number of studies have said that it takes time. Organizations and practices can plan for between 6 to 9 months to complete a director search project. So that you can have ongoing stability, having an ability to have an interim AED is going to be important. Review and update job descriptions. And this is really, really important. We've been doing this within my own organization, and I had somebody recently exclaim, "This is the first time we've looked at the job descriptions in 12 years." And I hope that that's not the case in the organizations that you work with. And I hope that with an individual practice that you have some type of job description for yourself as well, because I want people to be able to know all the things that you do. I think that that's very important. So that's a good thing to look at. Assign backup individuals, not just a backup ED, but people who can help with critical functions like tech, like having to do with finances and the treasury. Cross-train staff. Even the best developed succession plan will fail if staff don't have the skills, experience, or capacity to temporarily assume additional responsibilities assigned to them. So cross-training is a really good strategy here. What would the transition's impact be on the organization's culture? I mentioned that I had been working on this 3-year project. This is the thing that surprised me the absolute most. With especially a founder leaving an organization, what will the effect be on that? And not having that be a surprise is really important. Oh, Kitty, that is a great thing to take a look at. That will help on the tech side, and it will help on the succession planning side. We have a workshop that we're getting ready to debut in August on succession planning, where that is one of the exact scenarios. It's a tabletop on succession planning, and the scenario is that the person retires, takes all the passwords with her, and nobody can get into some of the databases. So we have to think about that. And then develop a communications plan. When I was talking to the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums about succession planning, they said that communication plan and communicating with your partners, whether it's work partners, partner organizations, is really important. So, there are a couple of things to take a look at in performing arts readiness. The stories that we have there, the case studies. There's a story called Dancing in the Light, the Dance Institute of Washington, and what they had to do when their founding director passed suddenly. And that was really the story. And the work that I did with their current executive director got me into this long-term project that I'm working on. And the long-term project report from the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts on succession planning. I will put that information in the chat just as soon as we talk about a couple of the other slides that I have coming up. So there's a lot to think about there. Yes, that is a Performing Arts Readiness tab on NCAPER. This is important too. Alternate locations. We need to lean into the idea of sharing. Sharing space can have positive outputs in addition to financial savings. We can share back-end operations. But we have really, really complex structures, whether it is a studio or whether it is an organization's building. It may be that the front of the building serves the public, while the back serves as a second home for artists and a factory for creative craftsmanship. And you need to think about how all these areas and spaces can work together. The studios may range from a simple home-based space to specific sites and facilities with specialized equipment, hazardous chemicals and hazardous materials. Again, in that call that I was doing in Ohio, right before stepping into this class, we were talking about hazardous material storage. And, administrative work might be done at home or at a non-art shared workspace. So addressing each of these worlds is really going to be important. Different spaces do have different needs and priorities. Which are the top priorities for you? So think about that and think about how we can retrieve some space and get to some extra space. And putting together a memorandum of understanding can be used to secure alternate locations in the event of damage or inaccessibility. It's a document that describes the broad outlines of an agreement between two or more parties to communicate mutually acceptable expectations of all the parties involved in a negotiation. It's not legally binding, but it signals that a binding contract is imminent, and it can be very helpful to have this type of thing. I will say you can have something that formal, but at the same time, you can have something very informal. And as I mentioned at our first class, but I wanted to just mention again here, the University of Houston during Hurricane Harvey, they had spaces for so many performing practices and performing artists. They were using a lot of spaces like their cafeteria and a huge coat check room for performances that had never been used for performances before. And we always joke that the president of University of Houston had one of those red telephones on her desk at the time, where people were calling her and saying, "Can we use space?" And so thinking about, is there an organization that's known for being able to have space, something that you can think about and you can use. On our next slide, we've
But
talked about, oh, yes, sure.
I just want to mention one thing, because this is coming up in the chat. Um, in all of this work, we don't want you to have to start from scratch if you don't have to. So among the resources that we will put on the site are some sample emergency succession plans, some sample MOUs like this, so that you can just use those again as fodder for your own plan. So
Thank you, Molly. I was building up a full head of steam, and that's an important thing to stop and add for sure. We've talked about this quite a bit, the idea of IT recovery planning. And I think because any part of the IT infrastructure could be affected by an incident, whether it's a fire or flood, information on each component should be included in your disaster recovery steps. Include who's responsible for what, who has the backups. In a situation where one staff member or an individual artist has all the core knowledge about a particular aspect of recovery, get those recovery steps documented in case that person isn't available or isn't on site. For artists, particularly, and we've been seeing this floating around in the chat quite a bit. Know where your backups are. Diagram your setup with modem, router, power, phone. Scale to the tech savviness of the person who's managing the IT system. I'm not very tech savvy, so I would definitely want to detail this and document this quite a bit. If you have a tech provider, you may need less of this, but I want you to check with that tech provider and see if they have an emergency plan. So that is all some areas to think about that could be important. So these are all some core considerations for working with your IT if a disaster hits those. The next slide is on recovery vendors. Think about recovery for your physical plant services, your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, electrical, plumbing, emergency services, roofer, landscaper, all of those folks. And this is as true, if not more true, in a studio that's based in a home or a standalone studio as it is for an organization. Think about the systems. Who's your IT servicer? We just talked about that. Who's helping you with marketing or ticketing? Personnel for operations, artistic work, your financial and communications work, and then cleanup vendors. Who are the water and fire cleanup folks that you would work with? Hazmat, mold remediation, salvaging of artwork. And we have some conservators who we will definitely be featuring and talking with and about in our final class. Programmatic materials and business records, making sure you can keep those, and IT restoration. Your state, and it may be your county, has a list of licensed vendors. Use those licensed vendors. Lean on your community too. Somebody knows somebody good who can help with this kind of stuff. Like neighbors share their best plumbers and electricians. This just happened in my neighborhood after we had some power outages at a couple of homes. We should think about, as artists and arts organizations, think about this as well. The important part of this list is who can help you recover quickly and have them be part of your plan. So consider developing relationships that don't yet exist. Consider talking with us. Consider coming to us in the office hours, and we can talk to you about some people who have disaster recovery vendor cleanup operations in many cities and talk with you about how good or maybe not good they could be in your case. So we can think about all of those areas. And then crisis communication. One of the most important things to do when an incident occurs is to communicate. And major incidents may require immediate communications in order to facilitate emergency response measures, saving lives, saving assets, and the environment. Some communication methods fail during disasters. So what can we do with text messaging, an emergency web page, social media? We were talking in my Ohio meeting before this about the fact that there is not a good, I think, yet national sort of best practice for push notifications. So, what's the best way to use push notifications in a disaster? I think that if you can look at these goals of effective communications, these can alleviate stress on internal and external stakeholders. It can improve response and recovery time, and it definitely creates a positive impression of the organization for the manner in which an incident was handled. And I'll say in the PAR classes that are on the NCAPER website, there is a crisis communications class by Kathy Rennie, who is based in New Jersey. That was, out of the whole 9 years of the program, the most popular and best evaluated class that we ever had. So there's good information there. Okay. And with that, I will hand things over to the tamale, and we can talk about one more exercise that we'll do today and go from there.
Great. And we're getting into the home stretch, folks. So this is a chance to again, all of the considerations that we have just talked about in terms of protection and mitigation are to be connected, right? These are all kind of cogs that fit together in your business continuity efforts. So thinking about all of these potentialities, how do you then brainstorm your mitigation and recovery strategies? And I'm going to suggest we take another 3 or 4 minutes to brainstorm what those might be for your top 3 critical business functions. And again, I'll just give you an example because I did this for NCAPER. The response facilitation calls. So we have created a written protocol, which every member of our steering committee has. And so we know when we trigger a response facilitation call. We have a standard list of all of the folks across the country who are typically invited because they either have information or resources or access. So that is available. We have standard language that explains what a response call is, why we do them. We have all of the Americans for the Arts, the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, and the National Endowment for the Arts are all on our steering committee. So they all have contacts in the locality that is affected. We have a standard Zoom link, which two other people other than myself have access to set up a Zoom. So my mitigation and recovery strategies for my people, our previous ED is still available and willing. So for instance, I just was on vacation for 2 weeks. So we had a written agreement while I was gone about what she would do while I was gone, that she would be on call, received a small stipend for being on call, had access to the email, and there was an auto message on my outgoing email that said, if this is urgent, email Jan. If not, I'll respond to your message when I return. And then for our website and social media, we have multiple people with access and authority. So our communications associate is very knowledgeable and knows that they have my authority, that if I'm unavailable and or if a big incident happens, I trust them to post appropriate information at appropriate times. We do all of our e-communications through Wix, which is a very stable, long-standing commercial platform that we trust. And we're served by a fiscal agent, South Arts. And so our email structure is through them. So again, I feel like all of our communication systems, which is one of our top 3 priorities, is on very stable platforms that I wouldn't have to worry about those failing. So let's give you all 4 minutes to brainstorm on some of your strategies, and then we're going to come back and just do some wrap up before we let you go and prep for our 3rd workshop at the end of June. So we'll give you 3 minutes to work on this. All right. Please go ahead and continue to work on this exercise. But again, if there's anyone that is interested in sharing some of the strategies they came up with for their top critical functions that you'd like to share aloud or in the chat, we welcome that. Sarah has shared in the chat. Apple has a backup system set in place. I've appointed a relative to be my trusted contact in case of emergency. I also have a super fan friend who acts as a volunteer assistant and has a mirrored backup of my digital archive with instructions. That is fabulous. What a great example. Thank you. Yes, and posthumously. I mean, we haven't really talked about this, but I know Tom does a lot of work in legacy planning and how particularly those of you who are artists want to have your legacy, your work live on after your retirement or departure. So anyone else interested in sharing what they came up with? Lynn, having written instructions and agreements with each other in case one or more board members become unavailable, as well as outside contacts who could step in to help. Great idea. Sarah, relative I select is a lot younger than me for that reason. Smart thinking. Great. Stina, we communicate with various stakeholders across a variety of platforms. So we have options if one platform goes down. Great. Options, always good. We have a small staff team, so staff can easily fill in for one another as needed. And former founders are active board members. Great. So you have that knowledge base, that well of knowledge that you could call on. Terrific. Okay, well, give folks another minute or two to share if you'd like. This crowdsourcing is always helpful. I think it helps you think of things that you wouldn't necessarily have on your own. Great. Well, thanks everyone. So we hope that these exercises have kind of gotten your primed the pump to start thinking about what can be part of your actual business continuity plan. So we've talked about analyzing what your greatest risks are, what your needs are, what your critical functions are, and selected your top 3, at least for the purposes of today. We've talked about mitigation and recovery strategies. What do you need to protect most? What do you need to restart immediately? And what resources might you need to make sure that that can happen? So now we're going to talk about actually putting this into your plan, developing your framework, your team, and writing down these procedures and documenting what your workarounds are going to be. So plan development. It's important to recall, just as your entire readiness plan is, that it is a living document. Its content needs to change with changes in people, vendors, any new procedures, any new spaces in which you are working. And as Thomas said, I think this can't be said too frequently, that the best learning is when something happens to do an after action review, figure out what worked and what didn't. What might you need to do to change safety? What communications might have been more effective? Who do you need to train? And then make those changes to your plan accordingly.
Molly, just real
Yes.
quickly,
Yes.
you are in presenter view rather than full slide view.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted
That
to.
has happened to me before. Let me fix that.
On a couple of my slides, I know the print's fairly small, so I wanted to make sure we
Let
got that.
me switch those over. Is that?
It's still presenter.
Yeah, that doesn't look right. Did that resolve it?
No, unfortunately. You may want to pull it down and reshare it for just a second.
Sure. Forgive me, y'all. Correct, Tom?
It isn't, but I think we should probably go ahead with it.
I apologize. It looks fine on my end. So,
Okay.
um, so again, if you are an independent artist, this is something that you might want to share with a studio that is located close by to you, or if you're a home-based artist, if you have a spouse or roommate, because they may often be left to pick up the pieces if you're suddenly unavailable. So it is respectful to engage them in this and give them information. And when your plan is complete, you want to make sure that it is distributed to anyone who has some sort of responsibility so that they have the results of this work, and again, that they are clear on what expectations might be for their type of response. And finally, testing, exercise, and maintenance. So again, you want this to be living, and that means that you need to test it. We talked in the first workshop about the fact that when a crisis happens, you tend to go into one of three kind of mental modes: fight, flight, or freeze. Any one of those is not a situation in which decision making or even short-term memory is going to be great. And so that's why it's important not only to write all of this down, but to do drills, to test it, do training and exercise so that it becomes more instinctive for everyone involved. So you should do some tests, make sure that your business continuity strategies are going to work. We had the test with Jan. I was gone and she was able to take some incoming communications. That was a live action test. But we made sure that that things were able to function as they were planned to. But there are several ways that you can do this and not wait until real life happens. It could do a checklist test. Defining a checklist, making sure that you have all of the pieces in place for the function that you want to be able to restart. You can do a structured walkthrough test where you literally get the people involved and you simulate it. You can do a drill where, again, emergency evacuation. This is something that I think we have heard in our research is most high on people's minds, but often is the one that is least done regularly. And then a full-blown simulation. Tom and I are prepping a workshop for next week where literally in the middle of the workshop, the lights are going to go out. And people are going to have to figure out, okay, what would we do if this happened in real life? And what are the steps that we would take? And would our plan actually serve us well? So a little theater doesn't hurt. Again, in terms of maintaining your business continuity plan, you always want to make sure that your contact information is up to date. This is something that you might want to calendar once or twice a year to check with everyone. Recognizing that teams morph and change, people leave, but people also move to different departments, or sometimes things get restructured, jobs get expanded, or jobs get consolidated. So you always need to keep those things in mind as you are updating your plan. And again, when there are alternate work locations, in Tom's example, there was a fire. Do people know? Do they come back to work the next day? Does only a skeleton crew come back because they're going to help with the recovery? You need to make sure that you have the communication so that people know what to do. And if things change, you need to document that and retrain everyone. So scoping back to the elements of your business continuity plan, these are the basics. You want to make sure that you have an introduction and purpose, even if this is just a paragraph for your own reference, how to use it, who is on the business continuity team, who are the key people who are going to take your essential functions and get them back up and running. What's the scope of the plan? again, writing down these things about what are the essential functions that you've decided, what are the strategies that you're going to take. And then writing down instructions. What are the actual steps and processes? Who are the people that we would need to contact? Who are the vendors that we may need to reach out to? And then making sure that there is ongoing preparation, training, and testing. And this might include also a to-do list. If there are things that you need to do, I need to update my insurance policy. I need to make sure that this cross-training happens, and a time and a plan to do so and make it happen.
Okay. Well, we wanted to move on, and actually, I think we've done really well in the chat. I'm really excited about saving this chat and looking through it, and thinking about things we could talk about in our third class and in your disaster plans. But are there questions you have from today's information that you haven't had a chance to ask yet? Um, I wanted to add one thing to something that Molly said before we start that, which I really like, which is I've had New Orleans and Houston colleagues say, yes, doing maintenance on your plan once or twice a year is good, or after each emergency or disaster happens. And so that will be key. Allie, we will have information and actually a schedule in just a few moments about when things are due. So we will be sure to get to that question. But any other questions on our content, on any of the sort of business continuity principles that we've been talking about? And again, either in chat
Yeah.
or,
Lynn has her hand raised.
okay, great.
Yeah, thanks. Prefacing with this feels like a dumb question, but there are so many plans that we should be doing and should be thinking about, and there's a plan for this and a plan, a plan, a plan. Would you guys be able to just give a quick overview, bullet points of when we put together a preparedness plan, what are the main plans that you guys think we should include in there?
We have a slide on that in just a few minutes.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, perfect.
So, but why don't we just get to that?
Yeah.
While you ask, let me pull up the slides again. Here we go. Oops. Okay, let's see if I can get this to the right format. So, Tanya, do you want to speak to this, or would you prefer Tom and I take it?
You go ahead and take it. It's fine.
Great. Again, the kind of buckets, the areas of functionality that we've talked about might be a way to organize your plan. That's totally up to you. But what the city is asking for is at minimum in your plan, some basic contact information, and you will get this all in writing, but including a primary and secondary contact in case you are unavailable. You can make the choice to have a redacted version of the plan submitted, because there will be some sensitive, potentially contact information, financial information, but the city will want the primary and secondary contact information. To identify what your plan covers, does it cover your digital records and your backup plans? Original artwork. Have you thought about making sure that it is protected, as well as equipment and other kinds of assets? And thinking about the readiness and business continuity planning for your whatever facility or venue you're working in, whether that's a home studio or multiple venues. And then the emergency contact information so that Tanya's office can reach out to you if necessary. So those are just some of the core pieces that will be asked for. And again, Lynn, we will continue to build the website information with some more sample plans, so that again, you can kind of look for things that are more in your scale, your type, and there are different ways to organize information. I know earlier there was a question about, is this a people thing or is this a communications thing? We don't care, whichever it makes most sense to you, so that you know when you look at it where to find the information that you need. And I see Jan has her hand up.
Yeah, just a clarification. You have digital records and then you have original artwork, equipment, and facilities indented under digital records. Is that just a typo?
That is a formatting problem. Those are all
Okay.
equivalent. Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And just adding to the slide here, really the thought here is we know that the plans are going to be individualized. They're all customized to your practice, to your business, to your organization, multiple locations, multiple modalities of working, and that's completely fine. I think it's a very kind of flexible plan that we've been discussing. This here is just some very standard baseline information, so it's consistent across the board. So that's really where this is coming from, and as a way for DCA to be able to kind of categorize it and, you know, just make sense of it in a very kind of quick and easy, efficient manner.
And this next slide is a recap of the timing of the program elements. And after this slide was created, we talked about in our team what the timeline will be. So I am going to put this in the chat. I can get to it. We are looking at you can be working on your plan, of course, and we hope that you will throughout this entire period. But our last workshop, which will include disaster planning, networking and mutual aid, and putting your plan together, that will be on June 25th in person. And then our final office hours will be on July the 8th. We will ask that at any point in that time, you are welcome to ask Tom and me for a courtesy review. You can share your draft plan with us, and we are happy to look at it and provide you with feedback, things we think might be missing or things that are unclear, or we can point you to resources that might help you to flesh out your plan. And then ultimately, you will submit your final plan. We will have information on the website about how to do that. I'm not quite sure if that will be through directly to Jan's office or to Tanya's. We'll confirm that. And then you'll do your final plan submission, and that I think will generate the final grant payment. So,
And
and Kelly, yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, there is a slide, a couple previous, that I think would be helpful for people to look at because they may already have, there it is, the discovery documents list that might be helpful. You may have a bunch of documents related to different types of emergencies and related to your business. And so these can be places that you can pick up information to use. And Molly's used this list before. So Molly, do you want to talk a little bit more about some of the things that you thought were especially important?
Sure. Thanks, Tom. When I work with individual organizations to develop a readiness plan, we start by going through this list. Not every organization or practice is going to have all of these, but often you have material that can go into your plan that already exists. So this is, as Tom said, a chance to kind of gather that together, and really what you do in your plan is start to centralize some of this. So obviously any existing documents or materials related to emergencies and readiness. And again, second on this list, any reflections or documentation of what you did in previous disasters. So many people, when we talk, have said, well, during COVID, we did this. In COVID, we did that. Well, that is, and have operationalized that. Well, those are great fodder for your plan because they worked. So incorporating those. Obviously, staff list and your organizational chart so that you know who reports to whom. Often your employee handbook or policy manual has information about emergency related things like, again, if someone is missing, is out of operation, who is authorized to step in there. Or if there are emergencies that happen, often the plan might have things like a whistleblower policy is in there so that you can immediately go and say, okay, if this happens, how do we act? How do we protect the whistleblower? Who is responsible for investigating the allegations, et cetera, et cetera. Board policies and bylaws, often these will have things like, this is how, if the chairperson is unavailable, who steps into that? If an emergency board meeting has to happen because something has damaged the organization, what is the timing? Legal, that's a legal document. Who is calling the meeting? How do you provide notice of the meeting? Who has to attend? All of that kind of thing. Again, any crisis communications plan or social media policies, who can post, and when. So that, again, a lot of this material you might already have, and you just want to pull out the parts that are relevant into your plan. So that's what this discovery list is in service of. And I'm just going to go back to, again, this timeline. Are there any questions on the timeline?
There was a question in the chat about the timeline.
Do we submit draft of our plan to you by July 15th? Let me see what. So July 15th, yes, is the last date to submit drafts. And so we will try to turn drafts around in 2 weeks. And so we will make sure that we get any responses back to you all by August the 18th at the very latest, so that you can incorporate them as you see fit, in order to make that final submission of your plan by August 30th. Does that clarify? Does that make sense?
Molly, I have a question about office hours in case
Yes.
anybody has wants to meet with you and Tom, maybe in private. They have some kind of a conversation sensitive. Can they just send you an email and you designate a certain time within that hour, or how would you handle that?
A great question. Tom, do you want to take that?
I think what we saw from our first session was that it was something that was just general topics, talking about general topics. But if there is something that comes out and you say, "Oh, I do want to talk about this privately," I think we can deal with that by email, or we can definitely have a side conversation if we need to. I think when we have our opportunity to do the June 18th meeting, let's have that sort of be an open meeting at first. But if we discover something, we can go and do a side meeting as well. So, yeah.
Great.
And we had a couple of other slides material that we've already gone over in our first workshop. These are materials that you can use. Molly said she had that list of things that you can utilize to build parts of your plan from your records. And here are some things, the case studies that we have, the webinars that we have, the information we have about our partners, many who we mentioned throughout the class already today, that you can utilize as well. And I always love, there is a piece from the Houston Arts Alliance, and they have short videos on different types of information as well. So we just wanted to show you, and we'll keep those in front of you as some templates, some other things that you can use. Tanya, and I think I also saw a chat question from Barry.
Yes, I wanted to address Barry's question from the G-chat. It's a good question. We mentioned redactions. Who will see the plan other than DCA? Will they be made public? No, the plans will not be made public. However, the versions that we would have in case other city departments if there ever is an emergency, need this information, we want to be able to make it available. So thinking about maybe the council district, thinking about the city's emergency preparedness department, or I'm sorry, emergency management department, similar agencies within the city family. So will they ever be put on a post as a post or on a feed or on DCA's website or newsletter or anything like that? The answer is no.
I know we have had a lot of information that we've gone through during the day today. Hopefully, it'll be helpful in you building your own plans. But we wanted to make sure before we round out the day that if you have any other questions that you think might be for the good of the group, that you have a chance to either put those in chat or ask them. So let's see if there are any other questions that we might have.
Yes.
Yes, there is a lot of information to wade through. So yes, we will continue to add templates and examples on the website again, so that the less you have to do from scratch. I'll try to help with that. Again, we will have both the slides and this recording up on the website within the next 24 hours or so. So
Yeah, the group can expect a few emails as we get closer to our third meeting date also. We'll give another reminder with some information about the parking situation and all of that at the Skylight Theater.
And Jan, we have a question in the chat that might be worth looking at, and that is about the final payment, the final grant payments.
Sorry, I was just putting in the chat to please
Okay.
fill out NCAPER's survey.
Oh,
you
yes,
can.
good, thank you.
It helps them refine their work and everything. And let's see what final grant payment will be received after receipt of your report, of your redacted or whatever version of it. So
And we
you
will
don't
put
have to follow the deadline that is suggested. You could move your project forward sooner if you wanted to. Yes, there's that question. That yes, you would get it sooner.
I would imagine, Tanya, although I would ask you to confirm this, that we do ask that you go through the final workshop on June 25th before finalizing and submitting something. Okay.
Absolutely. We want the completion of the 3 workshops, your participation in all 3. If you missed one of the workshops, please get familiar with the content on the website. Everything's available to you. Drop into the office hours. Just really try to maximize this opportunity to, craft a thoughtful plan that's very specific to your organization, to your business, to your practice. And the submission, yes, you'll submit it and then at least 1 round of reviews, a kind of good thumbs up from NCAPERS, and then you can submit everything to Jan and we can issue that payment. So it can be earlier or up to that end of August date that we provided.
So let's just say let's just say out loud that we will get these slides, this recording, some of these additional templates, and this outline of the plan review and submission process. We'll get all that on the website and then ask Jan to send out 1 email alerting everyone that it is there so you can review it or refer any of your colleagues to it that need it.
And one of the things
Sarah's asking how much earlier, and I think the idea is to participate in the last workshop and
Yes.
then start submitting after that.
For sure. And yeah, I was going to say, just to add that we have, the workshops, and then following up each of them pretty quickly, we have the office hours. So there will be the June 18th office hour for this session. And then there will be right after 4th of July, we'll have a July 8th session, office hour session, where you can get questions answered. And if we need to, we can pull off into a side conversation. And those will give you all of the education information, the ideas that we have, and a chance to talk through what we've been discussing in the office hours.
And then Molly, I shared the survey link. It says for the workshop number 1. Do you want a separate survey for this workshop, or would you prefer they go ahead and fill this one out?
We do have a second one set up for this workshop, and I'm sorry that you didn't have that link, but we can get that.
Sorry, but
It's
but you
okay.
still would like feedback on the first one too, yes?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. It's very helpful for us, particularly as we are working with a mixed group of artists and arts administrators, and many of you who are both, ways to make sure that we are delivering content that's relevant and in a way that is absorbable. So any feedback you have for us is always very welcome. And I will pull up that link right now.
Molly, should we stay on until 12:30 in case anybody has any questions? Otherwise, or we can dismiss, or how would you like to handle?
Yeah, I think we can. We will, I was just opening up the workshop number 2 survey, but yes, no need to stay on, but we are happy to stay on until the close if you would like to talk individually or have questions. And I'll ask Jan, I can get you these links and ask you to send it out to folks. How's that?
Sure.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Molly, thank you, Tom. I think about
you.
what you said earlier in the first workshop, Tom, when you said, don't be a lone wolf in recovery. And definitely use this group as your pack as everyone is signing off. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you at the 3rd workshop. Be on the lookout for communication with a lot of links, contact tree, and some of the recommendations that were brought up in the chat. Thank you so much.
In other
Thanks,
words, you
take
want to
care.
form a wolf pack.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
Jan is always coming up with these great things. That's another good one.
Interested in this program in the future, will it be offered again? Not 100% sure, Angie. This is kind of a model for us. This is that's why we have the surveys. We're kind of just trying to get a lot of information on how well it worked. We think it's a great program. I'd love to see it offered again, different parts of the city for, just opening it up to the general arts community. We'll see what happens, but thank you for expressing the need.
Is it okay to ask questions now?
Sure, it's been open discussion. We'll be online for till about 12:30.
Okay, so I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed by the not feeling like I have a template. And I'm on the website and I'm just wanting help getting to the part that's like for individual artists because I'm seeing a lot of documents that don't really apply to me, like succession planning. I mean, I'm sure I could make something up, but I see about us, policy, performing arts readiness, barn, crisis response programs.
So Marcion, you're on the main NCAPER website. You won't,
Oh,
that's okay. You won't find this page there because it's private just for you all. So I've just put in the chat the link to this program's
Oh, right.
particular
Okay.
page.
So I see the same about us policy, performing arts readiness, barn crisis response programs, tools, more. Where's the best place to find templates for artists?
So on the ARERPP page, there are 3 samples of plans that we shared at workshop number 1. 2 of them are published. One is for a dance presenter, Dance Cleveland. One is for Streb, a dance performing company. And then there is a mock-up individual artist plan.
What specific page of this is this on? Because that's what I'm not finding. I'm on the page that you put in the chat.
If you scroll down below the
Oh,
last
okay.
picture,
Art mock artist plan. Oh, and it's in
yes,
handwriting
there you go.
because we can't type, I guess. But
No,
good. There's a
it's because I did
template.
it on the plane,
Okay, all
actually.
right. Okay. And
Um,
then so that's sufficient. Like that would be like a good final plan for
it,
this.
it it is an example of how you can scale a plan to an individual practice.
Hmm.
We we will give you we are happy to talk about what makes a plan strong and what makes it weak. I cannot say, Marcion, for your particular practice that a 2.5-page plan is sufficient or not. But we just want you to think about these are the types of information that might go into a written plan. Um,
Hmm.
I'm not being very articulate. Com, is there anything you would say about that? I mean, there are certain we could probably, in addition to the information that Tanya shared, we can probably specify some other content that an individual artist should have in their plan. That I think is something that we could provide, Marcion, if that
I
would be
just
helpful.
also put a link to the SURF's Studio Protector
Mhm.
guide, which is really designed for individual artists. There's a lot in there to unpack, but that's information that's also linked in NCAPER's website.
I
But you
guess
can see,
also the part that's also a bit confusing because I am hyper vigilant in general. I'm always like thinking of like emergencies that could happen. I'm in an emergency right now with my mom having a stroke. So it's hard to process like big pieces of information, but in the plans, like it's completely different if you have a flood versus like a contagion versus a fire versus like a major health event. So is it important to sort of like branch out scenarios and then say what your response is?
That's
With that, I was going to say, with that, I would suggest from the first live workshop and from what we talked about today, I think at least taking what you think might be the top 2 or 3 situations that you think might be at risk or have happened to your practice before, that type of thing. I can see where you're coming from. You'd like to build it for everything, but think about what have you had to deal with before, and you can, I think, narrow things that way. And there are also some good aspects, even if you do build this narrow down to 2 or 3 types of risks. There are good aspects in what you'll plan for there that can carry over to everything that you'll do.
I mean, I'm also like in my parents' stuff, like they have like estate planning and it's just bizarre that it's happening at the same time as this like workshop, but
Mhm.
it's cool that they have all of that planned out. I mean, it is mostly for financial and property, so it's not specific to artists, but it's already like getting me thinking like how do I adapt? Like, I guess most of the examples have been organizations, and then I'm kind of like living in like a family crisis, and I'm trying to sort of like put together the pieces of the puzzle that like apply to me. And that's what
And I
I
think
think the main challenge is going to be for this.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, feel free to email us as you have a chance to think more about what we covered today, more about some of the examples that we have there, and you know, just say, you know, let us know if there are certain areas where you're like, oh, I need a little bit more of an example here, or hey, does artist legacy planning, can that be included as a little bit of a part of my plan? We had a couple of people in the class who said that they were thinking about doing that. So yeah, you know,
And
it
could,
right now it's relatively free form, but I think making it so it would be applicable to you and customized to you and your practice is the absolute most important thing.
Hmm.
another an additional yes and another way an additional way to think about your question, Marcion, is because it is very hard to think about every single possibility, and it's very hard to protect against every single eventuality. But one way to think about it is um, kind of an all hazards way of thinking. So for instance, if you think of, if I'm going back to my top three critical functions for NCAPER, and one are that I need to make sure that we're able to carry out our response facilitation calls. That is, I need to make sure that my operations can keep going, whether whether I'm not here or whether, I'm sorry, I'm not being very
It
articulate.
sounds like that
You,
applies to whether you're in a flood or if
in
you're
a,
Yes.
having like a
yeah,
legal
exactly.
challenge. Like,
Exactly
it's
what I'm
like,
trying to say. Yes.
Yeah.
You're
okay.
in a, yeah, you're interrupted from one of your resources, whether it's a people resource or a communication resource or your space.
Hmm.
What, it could be that you can't go in because it's flooded or because there's mold or because there's,
Or
a
because you're
chemical
getting
spill.
sued, like for whatever
Yeah.
censorship or
The
something.
point is you
Yeah.
can't get there. So what are you going to do?
Hmm.
Yes. So that is a way to think about, not that you should discount, as Tom said, some of the primary risks because of your location or your materials, but also you might just think about, okay, if my communications are interrupted for whatever reason, it's going to be my workaround. Or if my studio isn't available to me for whatever reason, what is going to be my workaround? Does that help?
I think so. I just am gonna have to really like hyper personalize it because it's like no, I'm already multi-hyphenated, so like no like artist pathway like exactly applies to me either, which is challenging. So I will figure out like I guess that's why templates, yes, helpful. And then I will try to like personalize it to what my practice is actually like. And then I also am an arts worker a lot of the time, but I think I'm gonna just focus on um like my own practice because I'm not currently being an arts worker.
I think that's a good approach. Okay.
I think something that I keep hearing that I think is important to stress in the next meeting too is just and you started like this, Molly, is that this is a working document. It's a living document. And it's for a lot of the cohort, I think it's a starting point. And so kind of meeting them where they're at, so that they're not overwhelmed by it because it is a lot of information.
Mhm.
So just kind of, just reminding them of that. And that's why it's not a template that we're giving to them to fill out, right? So um
Right.
that'll be good. We certainly don't want to generate more stress. We want to provide space and time for people to respond thoughtfully, without the added pressure.
Mhm.
So
Right.
this has been great. Thank you, Len, for staying on the call. Thank you, Marcion, for those really good questions.
Thank you.
Angie, thank you for for being here.
And we
I
will
love
see
it.
some of you on the 18th and see all of you in the next class for sure.
Thanks, everyone.
I love those
Thanks,
office
everybody.
hours. I'll see you guys.
Okay.
Bye.
All right,
Take
have a
care,
good
all.
one. Okay, bye.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Hi.
I'm going to save the chat. I was trying to earlier, but now that it's been done, I hope I get the full chat. So let me. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, John, for being here.
Yeah, and I'll just to let you know, I did go through and do attendance as well. So
Cool. Let me see if I got
And
everything.
I saved the chat if you need the file time, if you're for some reason not able to do it.
I have it here. I just feel like the chat was more robust than the transcript.